Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Grain Market Blast. It is Monday, the 8th of September, all day. You join myself and the glamorous goddess of grain, where Angie will be giving us a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, I'll get the legals out of the way. Nothing discussed on this space this session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed the wonderful, the glorious, the glamorous Angie Setzer. Angie, how are you,
Woo!
love?
I'm super. I'm really have that. What is it? 50 degrees out. It was 30 some degrees here this morning, which is less than ideal, though it wasn't as frosty as it was yesterday. So we have that going for us, but I have this weird sort of, you ever feel that where you're you have a chill, but you're not, anyway,
Yeah,
I'm
no, I
weird.
feel
What are you
you.
going
I
to do?
feel you.
I'm not in the mood for fall, I can tell you. But good news is we'll be 85 by the weekend. So, it'll be over before we know it. So happy Monday. I hope your weekend was super. Was it
Thanks for
super? It
asking.
was good. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
I
no,
hope
all
so.
good, all good. I was
Same.
working a lot of it, but yeah, it is what it is.
I was not. I was the exact opposite. We went up north and I pretended that I didn't have a job for a minute. It was great. So, happy Monday though. We got lots going on. New week, same market. So if you liked, going nowhere and really doing nothing and just listening to negative sentiment for a while, congratulations. You're in the right place because that's where we're stuck at for a minute. Really as we look ahead, big things over the weekend that had my attention, obviously weather-wise. There were spots of patchy frost, lots of reports of temperatures down into the mid-30s, and some of these other little issues that'll pop up. Is it a killing frost? Not necessarily. I mean, I think I've heard some spots where there are some folks reporting that it did, shut her down. It got cold enough. I think there were some spots that maybe got below 30 degrees here or there in parts of North Dakota, maybe northern Minnesota or something like that. You guys can tell me if you were somewhere out west and you got much colder than that. But, for the most part, the market's going to probably shrug it off. A lot of folks will shrug it off. I've been here before, and like I said, it's not a killing frost by any means, but you will have issues. You will have quality issues, in these spots, especially if they got, an excessive amount of frost or anything like that. It is going to be something that kind of nips us a little bit. On top of that, we are going from, basically going to get whiplash. We went from 90 to 60, mid 60s for highs to back up in the mid 80s towards 90 degrees here as we work our way over the next 10 days or so. We're already hearing about some early bean, harvest results, with moisture in that 10% sort of range. If you're already seeing beans harvested at 10% moisture in central Indiana, just after Labor Day, and we're expected to stay completely dry and now see the temperatures work their way back up into the mid 80s, you're going to see some continuation of just basically, it's an evaporation of yield. Your yield just goes into the clouds and falls as rain somewhere else on someone else's land and hopefully helps their beans, though it is getting a little late in the season for that. So that was the biggest thing, weather over the weekend, kind of spotty. Is it enough to get the market to freak out? Are you going to see pictures in central Iowa of corn that's froze off? No, it didn't get that cold down there for one, and for two, even in the areas where it did get extra cold, it's just more of those sort of silent kicks in the box later on that you'll get, with the low test weight, it's going to be difficult to dry down and you tend to see it crack and, just have an increase in FM and some of these other things. Over the weekend too, we had yesterday, a super important election, or at least an election that many are saying is kind of indicative of how folks are receiving, Milei's, economic agenda in Argentina. A lot of folks, did you watch that? I was surprised by it, to be honest.
Yeah, same.
But, a lot of folks had kind of said leading up to this is going to reinforce Milei. This is going to, because he's made a bunch of changes, right? He's come in and been more of a libertarian. We've seen cuts to government supports. We've seen cuts to the export tax on the grain side. You've heard a lot of folks really saying that he's changing the direction of Argentina and really going to help reinforce development and all these other things. But there's been a really interesting, oh shit, scandal. I forgot the word for a minute. I was like corruption. I'm like, that is part of it, but that's not the proper word for it there, Ange. But there is an interesting scandal that may have impacted this, where Milei's sister and someone else that was a part of his cabinet basically took a big bribe, kind of and got caught, and that was put into the public. And so there's a little bit of a backlash that folks have been seeing, but, to see Argentina or Buenos Aires, it wasn't Argentina overall, though there will be an election in another 6 weeks across Argentina overall, where the bulk of their Congress is up for election. But to see Buenos Aires over the weekend go back left, in their election results or in what you were seeing, it's really kind of, put an impact on their currency, really weakened their currency, weakened their stock market, and brought into question just kind of what you're going to see happen with Milei as we move forward. This is super interesting because you would think initially that this would mean that the farmer would be liquidating, supply. And so we'll want to see, here kind of what happens with the Argentine farmer, and whether or not the weakness in their currency helps to kind of, move more in the way of grain. But to me, it really just adds, another level of uncertainty for them. And what you have seen over the years out of Argentina is the farmer tends, because of the level of uncertainty that they've had with their currency, because you have an official rate and you have this unofficial rate, you see the farmer really keep the bushels out of the pipeline unless they need cash or unless harvest is coming and they have to move it or something like that.
Right.
And so it's really made Argentina a difficult country to kind of pin down on what they're going to do, how they're going to move it, and what this is going to mean for grain flow as a whole. Corn and, soybean meal, but mostly soybeans specifically right now, simply because China, if they want to replace the U.S. when it comes to these reserves, they need to go to Argentina. And so, we'll be watching kind of how this all plays out and whether or not this is just a sort of fluke, and maybe it's because of the whole scandal deal with the sister and the hundreds of thousands of dollars of bribes and things like that. But it could be an indication that when we have this election in October, Milei is going to be basically politically neutered, for lack of a better term. And then that kind of changes the whole entire direction of what we think happens over the next couple of years. Anything that you want to add in there on the currency side or anything like that?
No, I think it's going to be a very interesting one to watch going forward. I think as well. I think we are, like it or not, I think we're going to see some spillover from what's happening, not in terms of, in the ag market specifically, but in terms of the regional spillover regarding what's going on in Venezuela, because things are definitely hotting up there. And I think,
yes, there too. Yeah. So super
and,
fun in Latin America.
Yeah, it's one of those where, it's not, it's how often do we say it on the show where it's not a problem, it's not an issue until it really is.
Right.
You
love your butterfly effect too.
Yeah, it's just one of those million different things that we've got to have on the radar because sod's law, it will be infectious.
Yes. And so speaking of Argentina and Chinese soybean imports and all these other things, you're seeing a lot of headlines this morning about China's imports being record large over the last 4 months. And they haven't bought any U.S. beans. And so they've been, importing the hell out of Brazil and Argentina soybeans. And a lot of folks are like, oh, those are automatically going in. They're building reserves. Important to point out that China has actually had one of the largest or, basically the strongest crush capacity utilization rates that we've seen for soybean crush here over the last 6 months. Basically, like traditionally you would see China use about 50% of their crush capacity, maybe a little less than that. I feel like post-COVID, forward, we've seen it kind of sit in that 40 to 50% type level. You've seen it sit above 60% here, like I said, for the last 25 weeks or so. I need to go back and see, what that means, like the last time we saw them run at this type of level. But I feel like that's super important to kind of point out that, yes, they are importing the piss out of beans, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're putting them away either. They're using them, but yes, they are, there are some reserves and there's some back and forth. We saw a reserve offer out of China last week. The government's supposed to be offering 3 to 5 million metric tons, right? They're basically like, here's 50,000 metric, here's 150,000 metric. Like if they're going to go 3 to 5 million to get them through to the end of the year, they better get it, hustle up and do it. Cause right now we're not on track. So we'll be watching that for the most part. A few other things, obviously Weather Watch. I talked about that. It's going to heat up this week. You're going to hear, a lot more in the way of probably harvest progress. But also pay attention, if you're not one that is a farmer, if you're not one who's, kind of familiar with some of this stuff, one of the important things I also want you to kind of pay attention to is the moisture levels you're hearing about on some of these early yield results, you know, especially out of soybeans and things like that, because that's a true indication. Like I said, you know, if you're running 10% moisture beans, you had 3% of your yield just disappear, into the sky, unfortunately. And that's just how it works. We'll get a WASDE update on Friday, the 12th. So that's Friday, I believe, just to spite me, because I hate Friday WASDEs. But we'll have a Friday WASDE. That'll be the first objective yield data number and some of these other things. It'll still be survey driven. We had a couple surveys out over the weekend that were, you know, lofty, still up in that upper 180 range on, corn, and the mid almost, you know, 53.5, 54 bushel the acre range on soybeans. Most agronomists I talk to are like, no way, no how, but what do I know? I'm just here. So, we'll get the WASDE number. We'll see if there's any sort of development on the trade side of things. We did see Japan's prime minister, who said he wasn't going to resign, is resigning. So that's of interest, or seems interesting. But I think we talked about that a bit before, and otherwise just a Monday and a week ahead of a WASDE, and ahead of harvest. So probably not a lot of movement, you know, basically just maybe a lot of movement, but no real direction is
Quiet
what I'm
before the
expecting this
storm.
week.
Just
Yeah.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, because you know, right, everyone's in that holding pattern. You're going to get probably increased volatility due to increased. I'll start again. Increased volatility due to decreased liquidity, where everyone is taking a step back and working out what is going to happen next. And
Yes.
these are obviously always dangerous times, especially in futures markets, when you get that pull out of liquidity, and there's still there's still headlines going on, and there's just not that volume to soak it up.
Yes. Yeah, here we are. We're just going to wait, see what happens, you know, get some real harvest results coming in, you know, as time moves forward here this week and into next. And beyond that, we'll get the USDA update, probably see them remain a little lofty in their expectations. And so we just got to wait for harvest to get here and see where we head from there. So lots of waiting in those 4 sentences I just delivered to you.
Right. Well, Angie, thank you so much as always. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in as always with me and Angie. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully we add some value and maybe put a smile on your face. Whatever you're doing, if you're out in the field, stay safe. If you're in front of the screens, keep it tight. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Much love.
Have a good one, guys.